One of the first goals I remember having when I first started bodybuilding was having a gigantic, well-developed, mountainous back with that V-taper and huge, thick traps. I have a feeling that a lot of you feel the same way. But when I first started, that was an area that had little to no development, and I wasn't really gifted genetically to have a big back from the start. I assume a lot of you are in the same boat if you're watching this video. So I'm going to show you today in this video what to focus on to go from having a back that is tiny and underdeveloped to a back that is wide, thick, and powerful looking. And I'm just going to jump right into it, guys. When I first started lifting, one of the main things that I focused on was increasing my pull-up strength. I'm going to try 10 pull-ups, see if I can do this shit. I know that this is something you might have heard before, but I think it doesn't get advised enough. There is a popular piece of advice on YouTube Fitness propagated by powerlifting people, powerlifting folk, that deadlifting is going to be enough to build you a strong and big back. The truth is, that isn't the case. Deadlifting will grow your traps and it will give you good thickness in the spinal erector area, that kind of the top and middle of your back. I'll have some photos on screen to describe what I'm talking about. Deadlifts will develop that portion of your back, but it won't develop what we're looking for in most cases, which is that big, wide V-taper that comes from developing your lats. The deadlift just simply isn't enough stimulus for developing that area. You only really get an isometric contraction in your lats when you're doing a deadlift, and it's not enough to really get them to grow large and make it look like you're about to take freaking flight, you know? So in order to actually develop them to that extent, you're going to want to prioritize a movement that hammers them well. And that's going to be the pull-up, as I mentioned. Going from doing one pull-up to 10 is going to account for so much of your lat development in those early days of lifting. If you're somebody who's in their first month, just in general in your first year, and you still haven't gotten to the point that you can do 10 pull-ups, you're leaving a lot of gains on the table as far as your back development goes, and I highly encourage that you do that. If you have kind of no idea how, a very simple rule of thumb is, if you can only do, at this current moment in time, 3 pull-ups, you should spam sets of 1 to 2 and do a total rep kind of workout where you have a rep goal. Say your rep goal is 20 pull-ups. Do 10 sets of 2 pull-ups and get to 20 and increase the amount of pull-ups you do in that given session over time until you get to the point that you can do, you know, sets of 5, 8, and then you get to the point that you can do 10 pull-ups. Once you get to that point, you can then also start adding weight, which then unlocks an entirely new world of gains as far as your back goes, not just in your lats, but also your upper back and your whole back in general. The weighted pull-up is one of the best workouts, best exercises possible for doing this to your back, taking it from mediocre to elite over time. Now, keep in mind though, this isn't an overnight process. It will take its time. You will have to invest a lot of years into developing the back to get it to the point that it's really stand out. But you can still get a lot of great progress in the short term and milk out your newbie gains in that early phase of training by simply focusing on the pull-up and developing a really nice, strong V-taper through your lats. Now, another thing you're going to want to do early on in your training is prioritizing your rear delts. The rear delts are a muscle that's underdeveloped in the vast majority of people, and it's something that can stand to be more developed in pretty much every case. This is a muscle that helps to stabilize your shoulder. It's responsible for a lot of your shoulder health in general. It is amazing for building up good posture, and it just looks really nice when well developed. It's what's responsible for giving your shoulders that 3D pop that you see on screen. When you turn around, that rear delt is what's doing all the work. It's not the lateral delt, it's not the anterior delt, it's the rear delt. When you focus on developing that rear delt, you further exaggerate the V-taper of the back. And when seen from behind, they jut out on the sides and they create the 2 points that go down to your waistline. And this is very important for the overall illusion of the V-taper, and so developing the rear delt is going to be very important. a couple exercises you can implement for developing the rear delt. Can be something as simple as a bent over rear delt fly. Could be as simple as a face pull. You can incorporate cable rear delt flies as well. You could do the reverse pec deck. There's a million ways to hit your rear delts. And of course, any rowing movement that you do will also hit your rear delts, and they'll get a lot of stimulus from that as well. But it's always good to isolate them early on to help them get that head start development that a lot of people seem to lack. Now, another thing that I will say, the barbell row is a very popular movement and often prescribed for beginners in the gym. I find that that's a bad idea for somebody starting out because you simply don't have the work capacity in your lower back yet to really milk the barbell row for the value that it can provide. While it is a great movement for developing the overall back, getting you that thickness, developing those traps, and really hammering home that upper back area, it's not the movement you want to put most of your time into just because of the demand that it places on your lower back, which you simply do not have currently as a beginner in the gym. Highly recommend that you focus on pull-ups first. The goal here overall is to build a nice, strong, big back, and so the barbell row isn't going to be really necessary because if your lower back ends up being the limiting factor, then your back development is being robbed. Now, another thing I'm going to recommend for the sake of your back development early on is spending a portion of time training with just gymnastics rings. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, it could just be 6 months, but the gymnastics rings I think are one of the pieces of equipment that have the largest capacity for building an amazing back pretty much at anybody. And it is something that if you get good and strong with them, the dividends, the payback is insane. These things, the return on investment on them, guys, you buy them one time, they're pretty much a whole home gym for your upper body. And the development that you get out of training with the gymnastics rings is insane, and it's also multifaceted. Aside from just building a massive back, as far as your rear delts, your traps, your lats, and especially your lats, and even your core, to a large extent because everything you do is going to involve it. Aside from just that, it also helps you actively build mobility and it strengthens your joints and tendons along the way as well, because a lot of the movements are really good for stacking your joints and getting blood into them and having them be a supporting force during your movements. And so I highly recommend that you consider training with gymnastics rings if it's not something that you've done yet. It is something you should definitely try out because for me, it made a big difference in my back development. When I was in the gym training with cable machines, doing my pull-ups and whatnot, I was getting decent results. But when gyms closed down during the pandemic, I don't know if we can still say that, I employed gymnastics rings and used them primarily, and the development that I got in my back was insane. I'll put pictures on screen to kind of show you what happened as far as my development from before I used them to after, but god damn did it make my back a completely different animal from what it used to be. Alright, and the last thing I want to touch on is trap development. Obviously, a back is not fully developed unless it has both the width and the thickness, and so for your traps I do recommend that you deadlift and get to an appreciable number. A good standard is getting to a 4-plate deadlift, so that's 405 pounds. Once you get to that point, you can start employing more overload methods for the upper traps, and that's when I'll tell you to start incorporating things like power shrugs, rack pulls, heavy farmer's walks, those movements in particular where you get a very strong weighted stretch on the upper traps are a godsend for building them up, and nothing really works them like them. I've actually been training them, especially with the power shrug recently, in the past month to 2 months or so. I do plan on making a video documenting my upper back growth, as it is a weak point of mine that's come up a lot recently, and I highly recommend you give those movements a shot. They're a little more on the advanced side, so once you're done building a good base with deadlifts, that's when I'll tell you to start incorporating things like that. But in general, if you want to take one thing away from this video, if you are a complete beginner, a novice in the gym, and you want to build a big back, just primarily focus on pull-ups, and that's as simple as it's going to get. Getting strong at pull-ups is the bread and butter of a big, well-developed, holistically developed back, and I highly recommend that that be the core of your back training. But hopefully that was something that was enlightening for you. I hope that this information helps you develop that big, mountainous, turtle shell back that you've been wanting to get. If you like the video, guys, please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for your time. You have a great rest of your day. And as always,